Hey my dear listener, before we start, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Comment down where are you from and what's your time right now. Let's jump into the video. Story 1. Born into the age of coal and clocks, Victorian childhood from cradle to classroom. You enter the world quietly, or sometimes not quietly at all, in a narrow room heavy with coal smoke and the smell of boiled water. It is the early or mid-19th century, and you are a Victorian child. Your birth is not a medical event so much as a domestic one. Doctors are rare visitors unless something has gone wrong. Most births take place at home, attended by a midwife, often an older woman from the neighborhood whose knowledge is based on experience rather than formal training. From the very beginning, survival is uncertain. In some industrial cities, nearly 1 in 3 children will die before their 5th birthday. This fact is not spoken aloud often, but it shapes everything. You are wrapped tightly, kept warm, and watched with anxious care, especially if you are born in winter. Cold is dangerous. Damp is dangerous. Bad air is dangerous. The Victorians believe illness travels through foul smells, through miasma, and so windows may be opened even when the air is freezing, just in case. Your earliest days are spent mostly indoors. Mothers are told not to overhandle infants, and affection is expected to be calm and restrained. Crying is discouraged. You are fed either by breast milk or, if that is not possible, by mixtures of cow's milk, water, and sometimes bread or sugar. These substitutes are often unsafe, especially in cities where clean water is scarce. Diarrhea, known then as summer complaint, kills thousands of infants every year. If you survive infancy, you are considered fortunate. There may not be celebration, but there is quiet relief. By the time you can sit up, your world begins to expand, but only slightly. Victorian childhood is not designed around play. The idea that children require entertainment or emotional stimulation is still developing. You spend long hours observing adult life. Sewing, cleaning, cooking, repairing, waiting. Toys, if you have any, are simple. A wooden hoop, a rag doll, a carved animal. These objects are meant to teach calmness, not excitement. Your clothing marks you clearly as a child. Young boys wear dresses until around age 4 or 5, a practice known as breeching, after which they graduate to trousers. Girls remain in dresses throughout childhood, though often shorter than adult styles. Clothing is heavy, layered, and restrictive. Even children are expected to look orderly and respectable. Comfort is secondary. As you grow older, expectations begin to press in. Childhood, in the Victorian sense, is not a protected stage of life. It is a preparation period. You are being shaped for usefulness. In middle and upper-class households, this shaping takes the form of instruction. You may have a governess who teaches you letters, numbers, scripture, and proper behavior. Lessons are formal and often conducted in silence. You are taught to sit still, to listen, to repeat. Curiosity is not always encouraged, especially if it leads to questions about authority. In working-class families, learning is more practical. You watch your parents closely. You are taught how to carry water, how to mind younger siblings, how to stretch food so it lasts. By the age of 5 or 6, you may already be contributing in small ways, running errands, fetching coal, helping with piecework done at home. Time itself feels different. Clocks and bells regulate daily life more strictly than ever before. Factory whistles, church bells, school schedules all impose a rhythm that leaves little room for wandering or idleness. You learn quickly that being late has consequences. Illness is a constant presence. Measles, scarlet fever, whooping cough, and smallpox move through neighborhoods in waves. When one child falls sick, others often follow. Treatment is limited. Doctors may prescribe bleeding, purging, or rest. Many parents rely on home remedies, mustard plasters, herbal teas, poultices. Survival often depends less on medicine than on luck. Death, when it comes, is not hidden from you. If a sibling dies, the body is usually laid out at home. You may be brought into the room to say goodbye. Mourning clothes appear. Life continues, but with a new absence. This exposure to loss shapes Victorian children early, teaching them that life is fragile and temporary. Religion plays a central role in making sense of this fragility. From a young age, you are taught that obedience, patience, and moral behavior matter deeply not just in life, but for eternity. Sunday school reinforces these lessons with stories of reward and punishment. Heaven is described in gentle terms. Hell, sometimes less so. As you approach the age of 7, a subtle shift occurs. You are no longer considered very young. Expectations increase. You are expected to remember rules, to control impulses, to understand right from wrong. Mistakes are corrected firmly. Punishment is common and often physical. A slap, a cane, enforced silence. This is also the age when your path begins to divide sharply based on class. Some children will continue learning, preparing for clerical work or management. Others will soon leave home for factories, farms, or service. The idea that all children deserve education is still controversial. And so, even before you fully understand the world, decisions are being made about your place in it. Will your childhood stretch a little longer, filled with lessons and supervision? Or will it end abruptly, replaced by labor and responsibility? As you sit quietly in a narrow room, listening to the distant sound of industry or the steady ticking of a clock, one question hangs unanswered. How long will childhood last for you, and what will be asked of you when it ends? As childhood continues, it narrows rather than expands. By the time you are 7 or 8 years old, you are expected to understand your place. Victorian society is deeply ordered, and childhood is one of its first training grounds. You learn not only how to behave, but when and toward whom. These lessons are repeated daily, reinforced by routine, discipline, and the quiet pressure of expectation. If you belong to a family with means, your days are structured around instruction. Lessons often begin early in the morning after a plain breakfast. Bread, butter, perhaps porridge. A governess or tutor oversees your progress. Reading aloud is common, not for pleasure but for clarity and correctness. You are corrected frequently. Posture matters. Tone matters. Hesitation is noted. Writing is taught carefully, with emphasis on neatness and control. Ink stains are a sign of carelessness. Arithmetic is practical, useful for managing money, accounts, and trade. History lessons focus on moral examples rather than analysis. Kings, queens, wars, and laws are presented as lessons in duty and consequence. You are expected to absorb these stories quietly. Religion remains central. Daily prayers are common. Bible passages are memorized. Moral instruction is woven into nearly every subject. You are reminded often that character matters more than comfort. Hardship, you are told, builds virtue. If your family is working class, the shape of your days is different but no less demanding. Formal schooling may exist, but attendance is irregular. Schools charge small fees, and even a penny can matter. When money is short, education is often the first thing sacrificed. You attend when you can, learn what you can, and leave when you must. Classrooms, where they exist, are crowded and cold. Desks are hard wooden benches. Heating is minimal. Teachers rely on repetition and memorization. Discipline is strict. Talking out of turn is punished. Mistakes are corrected publicly. The goal is not curiosity, but order. For many children, education is brief. By the age of 9 or 10, work begins to intrude. It starts quietly. A few hours helping a neighbor, carrying goods, minding younger children while parents work. These contributions are framed as learning responsibility. Soon, they become essential. Time becomes more rigid. You learn to wake when told, to move when signaled. Bells, whistles, and clocks govern daily life. Industrialization has reshaped not only cities but childhood itself. Time is no longer flexible or seasonal. It is measured, divided, enforced. Punishment is an accepted tool of instruction. Physical discipline is common in homes and schools alike. A cane, a strap, a ruler. These are not seen as cruel but corrective. You are taught that pain can guide behavior. Obedience is framed as protection against moral failure, against poverty, against social collapse. Emotions are closely regulated. Displays of anger, sadness, or excitement are discouraged. You are expected to be calm, composed, and quiet. Even joy is moderated. Laughter should not be too loud. Play should not interfere with duty. Yet children still find moments of relief. In streets and alleys, in yards and fields, brief games emerge. Running, chasing, singing. These moments are unsupervised and fleeting. They exist in the margins of adult attention. Toys are shared, improvised, often broken and repaired. Play is not scheduled. It happens when time allows. Clothing continues to shape your movements. Layers restrict running. Boots are stiff. Cleanliness is emphasized, though water may be scarce. You are expected to keep yourself presentable, even when conditions make it difficult. Appearance reflects family respectability. Health remains uncertain. Illness interrupts education and work alike. When disease spreads, schools close or empty. Families quarantine themselves informally, hopping to avoid infection. You may be sent away to relatives in the countryside, where air is believed to be cleaner. These separations are treated as practical necessities, not emotional trials. Death continues to hover. You may attend funerals regularly. Black clothing becomes familiar. Cemeteries expand rapidly, especially in cities. You learn the rituals, the procession, the hymns, the silence. These experiences reinforce a sense that life is fragile and time is limited. As adolescence approaches, expectations shift again. Your body changes, but your options narrow. For boys, the future is increasingly defined by labor. For girls, by domestic readiness. Education, if it continues at all, becomes more specialized, focused on what you will soon be expected to do every day. Girls are taught sewing, mending, cooking, cleaning. These skills are framed as preparation for marriage or service. Boys are steered toward apprenticeships or manual work. The idea that childhood is a time for self-discovery does not exist. Childhood is a waiting room. Authority figures multiply. Employers, masters, mistresses, teachers, clergy, each expects obedience. Questioning is risky. Compliance is rewarded with stability, not advancement. By the age of 12 or 13, many children are no longer considered children at all. They are young workers, young helpers, young contributors. Their labor is measured. Their time is no longer their own. And yet, despite the rigidity, uncertainty remains. Employment is not guaranteed. Health can fail. Families move. Industries rise and fall. A single accident or illness can undo years of careful preparation. As you stand on the edge of this transition, no longer small, not yet settled, you may wonder quietly what comes next. Will the discipline you've learned protect you? Will obedience lead to security? Or will the world demand more than you've been prepared to give? With childhood thinning into responsibility, one unresolved question remains. When work fully replaces learning, what part of you is left behind, and can it ever be recovered? At some point, without ceremony or announcement, childhood slips away. There is no single day that marks its ending, no celebration, no rite of passage. Instead, it fades gradually, replaced by routine, fatigue, and expectation. In Victorian life, this transition happens early, often before you fully understand what you are losing. By your early teens, sometimes younger, you are expected to function as an adult in all but name. If you are working class, this likely means full-time labor. You wake before dawn. You leave the house while the streets are still dim, the air cold and thick with smoke. Breakfast is quick and plain, eaten standing or on the move. Time no longer bends around your needs. You bend to time. Factories, workshops, mines, farms, and households absorb young bodies easily. Children are valued for their size, their speed, their willingness to endure. You are paid less than adults but expected to keep pace. Hours are long. 10, 12, sometimes 14 hours a day. Breaks are short. Mistakes are punished. If you are apprenticed, the arrangement is presented as opportunity. You will learn a trade, a skill, a future. In exchange, you give up freedom. You may live with your master's family. Your behavior is monitored. Your movements are restricted. Your labor belongs to someone else. Apprenticeships can last years, and there is no guarantee of success at the end. Girls often enter domestic service. You clean, cook, carry, scrub. You rise early and sleep late. Privacy is rare. Wages are small but steady. For some, service offers stability and shelter. For others, it is exhausting and isolating. Homes are governed by strict hierarchies. A word out of place can cost you your position. Education, if it continues at all, becomes secondary. Evening schools exist, but attendance is sporadic. Exhaustion limits learning. Many children forget what they once knew. Literacy fades. Numbers blur. Survival takes precedence. Middle and upper-class children experience a different ending, but an ending nonetheless. For boys, schooling intensifies. Public schools and academies emphasize discipline, competition, and character. Emotional restraint is reinforced. You are taught to lead, but also to endure. Homesickness is treated as weakness. Physical punishment remains common. Girls of wealthier families are prepared for marriage. Education focuses on accomplishments, music, drawing, languages, etiquette. These are not meant to lead to independence but to suitability. Marriage is presented as both destiny and duty. Love is secondary. Stability matters more. Across classes, the body becomes a site of concern. Adolescence brings new anxieties. Growth spurts, illness, and exhaustion are common. Nutrition is often inadequate. Medical understanding remains limited. Pain is normalized. Fatigue is expected. Death remains close. Accidents increase as children enter hazardous work. Machinery maims. Mines collapse. Burns, falls, and crushing injuries are frequent. Some survive with lasting disabilities. Others do not return home at all. Families grieve quietly, often without the means to stop working. Illness continues to shape lives. Tuberculosis, typhoid, and cholera strike young adults as readily as children. Those who survive childhood are not guaranteed long life. Many Victorians expect to lose friends, siblings, even spouses before middle age. Emotionally, there is little space for reflection. Grief is managed through ritual. Exhaustion suppresses introspection. You learn to keep going. Yet traces of childhood remain. Memories surface unexpectedly. A song remembered. A game half forgotten. A smell that recalls a room once shared. These moments are brief and often unspoken. Nostalgia is not encouraged. Looking backward is seen as indulgent. By the time you are fully integrated into adult life, childhood has become something distant, almost unreal. It is spoken of in general terms, not personal ones. Children, as a category, exist, but your own experience is rarely examined. And yet, collectively, these childhoods matter. They shape the Victorian world in quiet, cumulative ways. Children trained in obedience become adults accustomed to hierarchy. Children raised with scarcity learn endurance. Children exposed early to death develop resilience and sometimes detachment. Over time, these patterns provoke questions. Reformers begin to notice the cost. Reports are written, statistics gathered. The idea emerges slowly that childhood might deserve protection. Laws follow, unevenly enforced but symbolically important. Schooling becomes compulsory. Child labor is restricted. Public health improves. These changes do not erase the Victorian childhood, but they grow out of it. The long hours, the strict discipline, the early responsibilities all leave their mark on modern assumptions about work, education, and resilience. When you look at childhood today with its emphasis on safety, development, and emotional well-being, you are seeing a reaction to what came before. Victorian childhood, with its brevity and burden, helped define what later generations sought to change. And yet some questions linger. How much hardship is formative and how much is simply endured? What is gained by early responsibility and what is lost when childhood ends too soon? As the clock continues to tick and another generation moves forward, the quiet question remains: what does a society reveal about itself in the way it allows its children to grow up, and what echoes of the Victorian child still shape your own life today? Story 2. Small hands, long hours. Child labor in factories, mines, and homes. You do not wake up thinking of yourself as a laborer. The word is rarely used for you. You are simply helping, learning, or earning your keep. In Victorian Britain, child labor does not begin with a single decision. It begins with necessity, quietly and almost invisibly, woven into daily life until it becomes unavoidable. For many families, work enters your childhood early because it must. Wages are low. Rent is relentless. Food prices rise unpredictably. Illness or injury can remove an adult wage earner without warning. When this happens, children step in not because they are ready, but because there is no alternative. At first, your work may be domestic. You mind younger siblings while your mother takes in washing or works outside the home. You run errands for neighbors. You pick coal from the street where carts have spilled their loads. These tasks are unpaid or poorly paid, but they teach something important. Your time has value, and it can be exchanged for survival. Soon opportunities appear. A factory nearby needs hands. A workshop needs an extra pair of fingers. A household seeks a young servant. Employers prefer children for practical reasons. You are smaller. You fit between machines. You crawl into tight spaces. You are less likely to complain, and if you do, your voice carries little weight. Factories are the most visible symbol of child labor, but they are not the only ones. Textile mills employ thousands of children, some as young as 5 or 6. You may begin as a piecer, tying broken threads beneath roaring looms. The air is thick with cotton dust. It settles in your lungs, your hair, your clothes. Noise is constant. Conversation is impossible. You learn to read lips, gestures, expressions. Hours are long. Before reforms, a factory day can stretch from early morning to late evening. Breaks are short and strictly timed. Meals are eaten quickly, often in the same rooms where you work. Mistakes are punished. Falling asleep can lead to fines, beatings, or dismissal. Mines offer different dangers. If you work underground, light is scarce. You may spend your day hauling coal in narrow tunnels, your body bent, your back strained. Some children act as trappers, opening and closing ventilation doors in darkness for hours at a time. Silence surrounds you. Time passes slowly. Fear becomes familiar. Girls work in mines too, at least until public outrage leads to legal bans. Before then, they haul, lift, carry, often barefoot, often soaked. The work reshapes bodies. Childhood softness hardens into endurance. Not all labor is industrial. Domestic service employs vast numbers of children, especially girls. You may enter service at 10 or 11, leaving home to live with strangers. Your work is constant but less visible. You scrub floors, carry water, polish metal, light fires. You are always on call. Privacy is minimal. Mistakes are remembered. Workshops and home-based industries blur the line between home and labor. Families take in piecework, sewing, lace-making, shoe assembly. Children sit for hours repeating the same motions. The work is tedious and poorly paid. Eyes strain, fingers ache, but it can be done at home, which feels safer, even when it is not. Employers often frame work as moral training. Labor, they argue, keeps children from idleness and vice. Discipline builds character. Industry produces virtue. These ideas are widely accepted. Even parents who regret sending children to work feel reassured by the belief that hardship has purpose. Yet the cost is visible. Children grow tired early, growth is stunted, injuries accumulate, burns, cuts, crushed fingers, twisted limbs, some wounds heal badly, others never do. Medical care is limited, time off is rare. If you cannot work, you do not earn. Schooling becomes irregular or disappears entirely. Some factories offer minimal instruction, short lessons tacked onto long days. These efforts satisfy legal requirements more than educational needs. Learning is fragmented. Many children forget how to read or write. Despite this, there is pride. Earning wages, however small, brings a sense of contribution. You hand coins to your parents, you feel useful. In a world where usefulness is prized above all, this matters. Identity forms around labor early. You are not just a child, you are a worker. Reformers notice these conditions gradually. Reports are written, testimonies collected. Children speak before commissions, describing exhaustion and injury in flat, practiced voices. Their words shock some listeners, but change is slow. Employers resist regulation. Families fear losing income. Laws are passed in stages. Age limits are introduced, then adjusted. Hours are reduced on paper. Enforcement is inconsistent. Inspectors are few. Birth records are unreliable. Children lie about their age. Parents do too. Survival demands flexibility. Public opinion shifts unevenly. Middle-class observers express concern, but often from a distance. They visit factories, take notes, return home. Sympathy does not always translate into action. Child labor remains embedded in the economy. Through it all, you continue working. Days blur together. Seasons pass unnoticed. Childhood becomes something remembered vaguely, if at all. You measure time by shifts completed, wages earned, strength remaining. And yet questions begin to surface. Is this necessary? Could childhood be different? Reformers argue that education, not labor, should shape the young. Employers counter that work teaches discipline. Families are caught between ideals and hunger. As debates unfold in newspapers and parliament, your life continues unchanged. You rise early. You work long hours. You grow older before your time. Standing at the edge of this vast system, one unresolved thought lingers. If work defines worth so early, what happens to those whose childhood is spent producing rather than becoming, and who decides when the cost is too high? As the 19th century progresses, something begins to shift, not in the factories or mines themselves, but in the language surrounding them. Child labor, once accepted as inevitable, starts to attract sustained attention. Reports circulate. Statistics are published. Parliamentary inquiries gather testimony. For the first time, the work of children becomes a subject of national debate. If you are a child worker during this period, these discussions feel distant. They take place in offices and chambers far removed from the noise and heat of your daily life. You hear rumors, perhaps. Someone says the hours might be reduced. Someone else says inspectors are coming. But when morning arrives, the whistle still blows and you still report for work. The earliest laws are cautious. They do not ban child labor outright. Instead, they attempt to manage it. Minimum ages are set 8, 9, 10 depending on the industry. Maximum hours are defined. Night work is restricted. On paper, these rules look significant. In practice, they are fragile. Age is easy to manipulate. Birth certificates are not universal. Many families do not know exact dates. Employers ask few questions. Children are coached on what to say. Taller children are favored. Smaller ones are hidden during inspections. Inspectors themselves are limited. There are too few of them responsible for too many workplaces. Visits are announced in advance. Conditions improve temporarily. Machines are slowed. Children are rested or sent away for the day. Once the inspector leaves, routines resume. For you, this means little changes. You may work an hour less or start slightly later, but wages often drop with hours, so families feel the loss immediately. Some parents resist reforms for this reason. They cannot afford the improvement. Education is meant to fill the gap. Laws increasingly require some schooling for working children. Half-days become common, work in the morning, school in the afternoon, or the reverse. In reality, exhaustion undermines learning. You sit in class barely able to keep your eyes open. Letters blur. Lessons fade. Teachers struggle. Classrooms are overcrowded, resources are scarce, children arrive late or not at all, some fall asleep at their desks, others are absent for weeks during busy seasons. Education becomes fragmented, uneven, incomplete. Meanwhile, the nature of work itself evolves. Machinery grows faster and more complex. Factories expand. Urban populations swell. Demand for cheap labor remains high. Children are still useful. They are still hired. In mines, reforms are more dramatic. Public outrage over underground conditions leads to bans on women and young children working below ground. On the surface, this appears decisive, but families adapt. Boys replace girls. Older children take on heavier loads. Income is redistributed, not eliminated. Domestic service remains largely untouched by regulation. Homes are private spaces, shielded from inspection. Young servants work long hours with little oversight. Abuse, when it occurs, is difficult to prove. Isolation is common. Leaving a position can mean homelessness. Home-based labor persists as well. Piecework continues to involve entire families. Children sit alongside parents late into the night, stitching, folding, assembling. Laws struggle to reach into these spaces. Work is redefined as helping at home, even when it occupies every waking hour. Health consequences accumulate slowly. Reformers begin to notice patterns: stunted growth, spinal deformities, respiratory illness. Medical professionals link factory dust to lung disease. Statistics show higher mortality among working children. These findings circulate, adding weight to arguments for change. But economic realities resist moral clarity. Employers argue that removing children from work will raise costs and reduce competitiveness. Parents fear starvation. Children themselves, accustomed to earning, feel uncertain about idleness. Work has shaped their identity. For you, reform is experienced unevenly. Perhaps you are moved to lighter duties. Perhaps you are sent to school more often, or perhaps nothing changes at all. Geography, industry, and timing determine outcomes more than intention. Public opinion continues to evolve. Newspapers publish illustrations of exhausted children. Campaigners use emotional language. The idea of childhood as a protected stage gains traction. Slowly, expectations shift. Yet even as laws improve, enforcement lags. The gap between policy and practice remains wide. Child labor declines gradually, not abruptly. It fades in some places, persists in others. Progress is measured in decades. You grow older within this transition. You are no longer the youngest worker. New children arrive. They take your place at the machines, on the floors, in the corridors. You move on to harder tasks, or you leave entirely, carrying the effects of early labor with you. Looking back is rare. Survival has required focus on the present, but occasionally you notice the difference between what is promised and what is lived, between the idea of reform and its reality. As society debates the future of work and childhood, one unresolved question remains suspended between intention and experience. When protection exists mostly in theory, how long does it take before it truly reaches the lives it is meant to change? By the time child labor begins to decline in visible ways, many of its effects are already fixed in bodies, habits, and expectations. Reform arrives slowly, unevenly, and often too late for those who carried its weight earliest. If you worked as a child in Victorian Britain, the end of child labor does not mean the end of its influence on your life. You grow into adulthood shaped by repetition and fatigue. Work has taught you endurance, punctuality, and obedience. It has also narrowed your sense of possibility. Having spent your formative years following instructions, responding to bells, and measuring worth through productivity, it is difficult to imagine a life defined differently. Physically, the marks remain. Childhood injuries resurface as chronic pain. Bent backs, damaged joints, weakened lungs. Many former child workers age early. By their 30s or 40s, they feel old. Medical understanding improves, but treatment remains limited. Pain is managed, not resolved. Education gaps follow you into adulthood. Limited schooling restricts mobility. Reading may be slow. Writing uncertain. Numbers learned for wages and hours may not translate into broader skills. Advancement is possible but difficult. Many remain in the same industries where they began, moving from child worker to adult laborer with little interruption. Emotionally, early labor leaves quieter traces. You are accustomed to suppressing discomfort. Complaints feel dangerous. Rest feels undeserved. Leisure, when it appears, can be unsettling. Idleness has long been associated with risk of punishment, of hunger, of moral failure. Family life reflects these patterns. Former child workers often expect their own children to contribute early, even as laws change. Work is equated with responsibility. Protection feels unfamiliar, sometimes indulgent. Reform does not erase habit. Yet change does come. Compulsory education expands. School attendance increases. Over time, fewer children enter full-time labor. Childhood stretches slightly longer. The factory floor grows older. These shifts are gradual but real. Looking back, reformers claim success. Statistics improve. Mortality declines. Literacy rises. The image of the child worker becomes historical rather than contemporary. But memory lingers, especially among those who lived it. Some former child laborers speak out later in life. They describe exhaustion, fear, pride, and loss in equal measure. Their accounts resist simple conclusions. Work was harmful, but it also kept families alive. Labor stole time, but it also offered belonging. The experience cannot be reduced to cruelty alone. Victorian society learns from this complexity. Modern labor laws, education systems, and child protections grow out of these contradictions. The belief that childhood should be protected is not inevitable, it is earned through exposure to what happens when it is not. Even today, echoes remain. Debates about youth employment, economic necessity, and responsibility repeat familiar arguments. Where does learning end and labor begin? When does contribution become exploitation? Who bears the cost of protection? The Victorian child worker stands at the beginning of these questions. Their lives form a bridge between acceptance and reform, between necessity and conscience. They remind us that progress often begins not with agreement, but with endurance. As the factories continue and the laws evolve, one final thought lingers, unresolved and persistent. When a society looks back on the work its children once did, does it see sacrifice, injustice, or simply the price it was willing to pay at the time? Story 3. Learning to behave. Discipline, punishment, and moral training. From the moment you can walk, you are under instruction, not only in reading or arithmetic, but in behavior, posture, and the moral expectations of your family and society. Victorian childhood is defined not only by survival and labor, but by the subtle, constant shaping of conduct. To be a child is to be watched, measured, corrected, and molded. Obedience is not merely encouraged, it is demanded. Your earliest lessons are quiet but firm. Sit still, speak politely. Don't touch what is not yours. Learn to share. Learn to wait. You do these things not out of curiosity or understanding, but because failure brings immediate consequence. A sharp word, a slap of the hand, or the stern glare of a parent or teacher. Discipline is omnipresent. It is as much about shaping your body as your mind. Religious instruction permeates early moral training. At home and in Sunday school, you are taught the stories of the Bible, the virtues of patience, humility, and obedience, and the dangers of sin. Good behavior is framed as a pathway to eternal reward. Misbehavior risks not only earthly punishment but spiritual peril. From a young age, morality is intertwined with fear and duty. You begin to measure right and wrong not by natural curiosity, but by the consequences imposed from above. Schools are institutions of rigor. Your teacher, often stern and unyielding, expects repetition, accuracy, and silence. Mistakes are corrected publicly. reinforcing the social hierarchy within the classroom. Corporal punishment is common. A misread line, an untidy desk, or a momentary lapse in posture may bring the cane or ruler down sharply across your hands or back. The pain is immediate, but so is the lesson. Your body is a vehicle for conformity. Discipline is not only physical. You are expected to regulate your emotions, to maintain calm, to restrain laughter, anger, and frustration. Tears are discouraged. Outbursts are dangerous. You are taught that endurance is a virtue and emotional display a weakness. The lessons are repeated in small, quiet ways every day, in the measured tone of a parent's voice, in the chores assigned, in the seating arrangement at the table. Homes reinforce schools. Chores are assigned and monitored. Failure results in punishment or shamming. Observing older siblings offers additional instruction. You learn not only what is right, but also how authority is structured. Obedience is a form of social training, a preparation for life in a hierarchical society where your place must be recognized and maintained. Moral training extends beyond the home and school into the street. You are taught to navigate public spaces cautiously, avoiding improper speech, dangerous behavior, or the company of children deemed unruly. Street life is full of temptation, mischief, theft, laziness. Moral education frames these dangers as not only threats to your present but to your eternal soul. Gendered expectations are strict. Boys are encouraged toward self-control, courage, and public-minded duty. Girls are molded toward patience, humility, and service. Even play is regulated. Boys may run and climb to a point, but roughness is moderated. Girls are expected to practice quiet, orderly games that reflect domestic roles. Your play is training for adulthood, reinforcing societal norms. Yet the methods are not uniform. Some households emphasize kindness and instruction. Others rely heavily on punishment. Some teachers balance discipline with encouragement. Others use fear as the primary tool. You may experience contradictory messages, love and punishment intertwined, instruction mixed with intimidation. These inconsistencies shape not only your understanding of morality but your understanding of trust, authority, and your own self-worth. You begin to understand that the rules exist for reasons you may not fully grasp. Obedience protects against disorder, yes, but it also protects the adults around you, shields families from shame, and prepares you to function in a society that prizes conformity. Your body learns before your mind. Stillness, endurance, patience. Your mind follows, shaped by repetition and correction. Despite the strictness, subtle resistance emerges. Moments of quiet defiance, mischief, or imagination appear in the spaces between work and instruction. You may whisper jokes to a sibling, alter a drawing, or sneak a storybook under your blanket. These small acts are rarely noticed, yet they form the thin lines where personal identity persists. And still, the larger question looms. As your behavior is continuously corrected and your mind molded, what part of your individuality remains intact? By the time the first lessons of formal morality and discipline are complete, the path ahead school, work, service is already framed by these early instructions. The tension between conformity and selfhood is unresolved, lingering quietly in your awareness. Every day, every chore, every stroke of the cane reinforces it. You learn the rules, but you begin to wonder, how much of who you are will belong to you, and how much will belong to the world that has trained you to obey? As you grow older, the lessons of discipline deepen. By the age of 8 or 9, the simple instructions of early childhood, sit still, don't cry, obey, transform into complex expectations. You are now held accountable not only for behavior but for thought, attention, and even ambition. Obedience is no longer a domestic or classroom principle alone. It is a social contract. Every misstep is a potential reflection on your family, your school, and ultimately your own future. At school, the environment becomes more regimented. You line up, recite prayers, and repeat lessons with exacting precision. Teachers observe constantly. Mistakes are punished promptly. A mispronounced word, a crooked letter, a whispered comment, all can provoke physical correction. The cane or ruler is ever present, a silent reminder of authority. The memory of pain and the anticipation of consequence shape your movements, your posture, your breathing. You learn to anticipate, to self-correct, to internalize surveillance even when no one is watching. Home is no less rigorous. Chores increase in complexity and frequency. Younger siblings must be cared for, meals prepared and cleaned up, clothing washed and repaired. Failure to meet expectations brings scolding, deprivation of privileges, or corporal punishment. Parents emphasize diligence, endurance, and moral propriety. Obedience is framed as protection. Following instructions preserves family order and prevents shame. Religion continues to reinforce authority. Sunday sermons, scripture memorization, and moral tales teach lessons about reward and punishment. Heaven is described as a reward for virtue, hell as punishment for sin. These images are more than spiritual, they are practical, shaping your understanding of consequence in daily life. Morality, duty, and obedience intertwine with fear. You begin to weigh every action not only against immediate consequence, but against eternal judgment. Discipline is gendered and socially coded. Boys are trained to be stoic, industrious, and assertive within accepted boundaries. Girls are taught patience, humility, and service. Play and leisure are carefully supervised to reinforce these expectations. Rough play for boys is permitted only up to the point it teaches courage or strength. Games for girls emphasize cooperation, order, and refinement. Even friendships are shaped to reflect societal norms. The streets offer rare glimpses of freedom, but they too are monitored. Adults observe behavior, warn against mischief, and correct public transgressions. Small acts of rebellion, skipping errands, whispering secrets, minor theft are noted and punished when discovered. These small transgressions, however, allow you to experiment with autonomy and teach lessons in subtle resistance. Punishment is not uniform. In some schools, teachers balance correction with guidance, offering rewards, praise, or recognition. In others, fear dominates. Corporal punishment is frequent and unrelenting. Public humiliation is common. A child may be forced to stand outside, wear a dunce cap, or recite failures aloud. These experiences embed a sense of hierarchy and vigilance. Authority is internalized. You learn to monitor not only others' expectations but your own behavior. Obedience is also transactional. Compliance brings privileges, small treats, extra attention, or simply avoidance of pain. Misbehavior brings immediate cost. This constant feedback conditions responses. Your identity begins to intertwine with compliance. Self-worth is measured in performance, not desire. You begin to wonder whether you can ever act purely from inclination rather than expectation. By your early teens, these lessons converge with labor. Apprenticeships, factory work, and domestic service place you under multiple layers of authority simultaneously. Employers, supervisors, household heads, senior apprentices. Each layer expects obedience, endurance, and reliability. Time becomes regimented. Mistakes may cost not only wages but survival or shelter. Your body and mind are trained to respond to external demands continuously. Yet despite these pressures, moments of imagination persist. Secret reading, whispered conversations, small acts of creativity allow the self to persist in hidden corners. These moments are rare and fragile, yet crucial. They are reminders that you are not entirely defined by rules and punishment. As you reflect on this phase of life, one quiet tension emerges. The very mechanisms designed to prepare you for adult life, discipline, moral instruction, obedience, also narrow your sense of possibility. You learn to navigate authority with precision, but at the cost of questioning it. You gain resilience, but at the cost of spontaneity. You understand duty, but the shape of personal desire becomes hazy. The unresolved question hangs persistently in the background. When every action, thought, and feeling is shaped to serve others, expectations. How does one retain a sense of self, and what parts of your childhood belong only to you? As adolescence approaches, the lessons of obedience and discipline solidify into patterns that shape the rest of your life. By this point, The daily repetition of rules, correction, and moral instruction has become second nature. Your body and mind have been trained to anticipate authority, to moderate impulses, and to perform tasks with precision. These skills learned through strictness, fear, and routine prepare you for the adult roles Victorian society expects of you, but they also leave enduring traces on your sense of identity. In school, mastery is measured by compliance as much as knowledge. You can recite passages correctly, perform calculations accurately, and maintain proper posture. Mistakes still bring correction, but you have learned to anticipate failure and preempt it. Self-regulation becomes automatic. You move through life as if under constant observation even when none exists because you have internalized the watchful gaze of teachers, parents, and society itself. At home, obedience is no longer optional. Chores and responsibilities intensify as younger siblings are cared for, households maintained, and duties performed without complaint. Every action is observed for efficiency and correctness. Deviations from expectation are corrected, sometimes subtly, sometimes harshly. Compliance has become survival. You have learned that discipline protects you from immediate danger, social shame, and familial disappointment. Labor and service consolidate these lessons further. Young men enter apprenticeships, workshops, or factories. Young women enter domestic service or continue education narrowly focused on domestic skills. The expectation of obedience is now intertwined with the expectation of productivity. Every task is monitored, every error noted. Corporal punishment may persist in some settings, but the internalization of discipline now dominates. Your body, trained since early childhood, performs without need for constant external prompting. Religion and moral instruction continue to shape your worldview. Virtue is linked to endurance, patience, and obedience. The lessons learned in childhood punctuality, deference to authority, suppression of emotion reinforce moral identity. You may never consciously question the system. Obedience has been equated with morality from the earliest days. Yet these lessons come at a cost. Spontaneity, curiosity, and independence have been constrained. Moments of quiet rebellion or imaginative play are remembered fondly but remain fleeting. Personal identity has developed largely within the boundaries set by adults and institutions. Your ambitions and desires are measured against societal norms and often suppressed. Despite these constraints, resilience is forged. The constant demands of discipline and moral instruction produce a sense of endurance, an ability to manage discomfort, and a readiness to meet the challenges of adult life. The very structures that limit freedom also cultivate strength. The child trained to obey can now navigate the expectations of employers, social hierarchies, and domestic authority with competence and reliability. Society, meanwhile, begins to recognize the consequences of these practices. Educational reforms, moral instruction updates, and labor regulations emerge not to dismantle discipline entirely, but to moderate its extremes. School curricula incorporate more critical thinking, hygiene instruction, and practical knowledge. Child labor laws begin to extend protections. Yet the values instilled by decades of early obedience persist, subtly influencing generations to come. You reflect, perhaps in quiet moments, on the paradox of these years. Discipline shaped you, moral instruction guided you, and obedience protected you, but it also limited you. Childhood in its strictest Victorian form was brief and regimented, and its lessons echo far beyond the nursery and classroom. You carry them into adulthood, shaping your work, your relationships, and your understanding of authority. And in the end, a question lingers quiet, almost imperceptible, yet persistent. When a life has been molded by the careful, constant shaping of rules and correction, what remains of the self that existed before those lessons began, and can it ever truly be recovered? Story 4. Bread, gruel, and tea. What Victorian children ate and why. Food is both survival and instruction in Victorian childhood. From the moment you can choose solid food, Your diet reflects not only what is available, but what adults believe you should endure. Nutrition is practical, economical, and sometimes harsh. Luxury is rare. Even in middle-class households, meals are carefully controlled to teach moderation, self-restraint, and obedience. Your earliest solids are simple: bread soaked in milk, thin porridge, a small piece of cheese. Meat is often scarce, reserved for Sundays or special occasions. Vegetables are limited by season and income. For working-class families, the emphasis is on quantity rather than variety, food that fills but may not nourish optimally. Hunger is a familiar companion, and fullness is measured in stomach stretching, not flavor. Gruel thin, watery porridge is a staple. It is filling, inexpensive, and easy to prepare in large quantities. Children are expected to eat it without complaint, even if it is bland. Sometimes sugar or treacle is added, but such additions are occasional treats, not daily indulgences. Gruel is not designed to delight, it is designed to sustain. Eating it becomes a lesson in endurance as much as nutrition. Bread appears in nearly every meal. It is a foundation, both literal and symbolic, representing stability and sustenance. Bread is paired with small amounts of butter, dripping, or preserved fruit when available. It teaches a rhythm. Breaking bread becomes a daily ritual, a marker of time and propriety. You learn to eat politely, with restraint, without making waste or noise. Tea, strong, often bitter, and always hot, is another defining element. Even children partake in afternoon tea in many households. Tea is more than beverage. It is a civilizing tool. Drinking it teaches patience, composure, and adherence to ritual. Cups must be handled carefully. Sugar may be scarce. Drinking slowly is a test of refinement. Tea is nourishment and social training combined. Meat, when it appears, is carefully rationed. Roasts, stews, and boiled cuts are reserved for Sundays or special occasions. You may be given only the scraps or bones, which you learn to chew thoroughly and extract flavor from. Every mouthful is economy in practice, a lesson in thrift and patience. Vegetables are seasonal and often repetitive. Potatoes, carrots, cabbage. Preservation techniques are rudimentary. Fresh vegetables vanish in winter, replaced by stored roots or dried legumes. You learn to accept monotony as natural. Variety is not expected. Food is not a pleasure, it is a necessity. Sweet treats are rare and often reserved as rewards. A piece of cake, a small biscuit, a slice of fruit may mark achievement, obedience, or special occasions. These small pleasures carry moral weight. They are not indulgences, they are tools of instruction, reinforcing compliance, patience, and gratitude. Children working in factories, workshops, or mines face additional challenges. Meals are hurried, breaks are brief. Often you carry food from home in small containers. Gruel or bread may be eaten in the shadow of machinery, sometimes standing, sometimes at a table too high or too crowded. Food must be consumed efficiently. Fatigue dulls appetite. Hunger is chronic. Malnutrition is common. Skipping meals, thin diets, and physical exertion combine to stunt growth, weaken bones, and reduce resistance to disease. Scurvy, rickets, and other deficiency diseases are not unusual among working children. Yet the cultural expectation is to endure. Complaints about food are discouraged. Children learn that endurance is virtuous, and that appetite is to be restrained, not indulged. Middle-class children experience slightly different patterns. Meals are more varied, with more meat, dairy, and fresh vegetables. Still, table manners are rigorous. Children are corrected for spilling, reaching for food improperly, or speaking out of turn. Eating itself becomes a moral exercise. Even abundance is framed by control, moderation, and propriety. Meals are also structured around the clock. Breakfast, lunch, tea, and dinner mark the passage of the day. You learn to measure time not only by work or school but by the rhythm of eating. Delays, absence, or overeating are noted and corrected. Food becomes a framework for discipline as well as sustenance. Yet even in this rigid system, small acts of autonomy emerge. You may savor a morsel of sweet in secret, dip bread in tea against instruction, or linger over a taste that delights. These moments, rare and fleeting, form a quiet rebellion, a reminder that even in regulated diets, pleasure can persist. And so, food shapes more than your body, it shapes your mind, your endurance, and your understanding of the world. Every meal is a lesson in patience, hierarchy, and survival. It is sustenance, discipline, and socialization all at once. But questions linger beneath every bite. How much of childhood is defined by what you consume? And how does a diet of necessity rather than delight shape not only your body, but your understanding of comfort, reward, and resilience? By the time you are old enough to work outside the home, food takes on a new and urgent significance. It is no longer merely a matter of domestic routine or moral training. It becomes fuel for survival. Long hours in factories, mines, and workshops require energy, yet the rations provided are often insufficient, poorly balanced, and eaten in haste. Hunger is constant, and eating itself becomes a structured act of endurance rather than enjoyment. For factory children, breakfast may be rushed before the whistle blows. A thin slice of bread, perhaps with a smear of butter, accompanied by a cup of weak tea, is all that precedes hours of labor. The cold, damp air and the physical exertion demand more than this meager meal can supply. By mid-morning, your stomach protests, reminding you that endurance has limits. Hunger is an ever-present companion, teaching patience and obedience in equal measure. Lunchtime is brief and utilitarian. Food is eaten standing, leaning over machinery, or in crowded rooms with little ventilation. Workers carry bread, cheese, or leftover scraps from home in small boxes. Sometimes gruel or cold porridge is offered, but these are rarely filling. Meals are dictated by the pace of the workday, not by appetite. If you linger too long, you risk reprimand or falling behind in productivity. In mines, conditions are harsher still. The air is thick with dust. Light is minimal. You may eat small portions of bread or meat during short breaks, but fatigue and anxiety suppress appetite. Some children nibble in secret, sharing morsels with friends to stave off hunger. Every bite becomes precious. Survival is intertwined with ingenuity, and small acts of resourcefulness emerge. Hiding food, stretching rations, or trading scraps are learned behaviors, early lessons in negotiation and self-preservation. Domestic service offers another pattern. Meals are structured around the household schedule. You eat when permitted, often after the family has finished. Food is rationed according to status, and any perceived greed is met with disapproval. The servant learns to be discreet, patient, and grateful. The timing, quantity, and type of food teach hierarchy as clearly as chores or rules. Malnutrition is a constant threat. Deficiencies in protein, vitamins, and minerals affect growth and health. Rickets, scurvy, and other preventable conditions are common among working children. Fatigue, susceptibility to disease, and physical weakness become daily challenges. Even in households where the diet is comparatively adequate, the combination of physical exertion and inconsistent meals produces a sense of constant hunger. Despite scarcity, food continues to be a source of subtle instruction. Eating slowly and without complaint demonstrates discipline. Finishing all that is served reflects obedience. Sharing limited portions with siblings or peers signals morality. Even the smallest morsel becomes a lesson in thrift and propriety. Pleasure is secondary, if it exists at all. Middle-class children experience more regular meals, but the lessons remain. Meals are structured, timed, and ritualized. Overeating, sloppiness, or indulgence are corrected. Table manners are monitored constantly. Elbows off the table, napkin folded, proper use of cutlery. Etiquette is an education in itself, intertwining morality, social hierarchy, and control. Even when abundance exists, moderation is drilled into you, shaping your relationship to food, desire, and self-restraint. Celebrations and treats punctuate the monotony. Birthday cakes, small candies, and holiday feasts provide rare glimpses of indulgence, but these are exceptions. They are framed as rewards for good behavior or accomplishment, teaching a connection between morality, effort, and pleasure. In these moments, food is both delight and moral lesson, a complex reinforcement of the broader social order. Hunger, scarcity, and regulation leave lasting impressions. You learn to manage appetite, ration portions, and adapt to variable quality. Food becomes inseparable from time, labor, and morality. You internalize lessons about endurance, propriety, and survival. Even when diet improves later in life, these early patterns shape appetite, taste, and the psychological relationship to nourishment. Yet questions linger amid these daily routines. If childhood is defined by scarcity and regulation, what does it mean for a generation raised on necessity rather than choice? How do these early experiences shape resilience, fear, and understanding of comfort? And what traces remain in those who endured hunger quietly while the world expected them to grow, learn, and obey? As you move from childhood toward adolescence, food is no longer simply a meal. It is work, endurance, and moral exercise intertwined. And in the back of your mind, one thought persists. How much of a life's patterns, even pleasure, are set by what a child was forced to eat or denied long before they could decide for themselves? As childhood fades into adolescence, the lessons learned at the table endure. What you ate or were denied shaped more than your body. It shaped your habits, resilience, and understanding of the world. In Victorian life, food was a teacher as much as it was sustenance. Every meal, every morsel, every moment of hunger carried moral, social, and practical significance. For working-class children, early labor amplified these lessons. Hours spent at looms, in workshops, or underground in mines demanded physical endurance. Food, often insufficient, became both fuel and constraint. You learned to ration portions, make scraps last, and eat quickly. Meals were no longer a pleasure, they were a necessity carefully managed. Hunger sharpened focus, forged patience, and instilled a quiet determination. But it also left a mark: fatigue, stunted growth, and sometimes long-term illness. Bones, teeth, and digestion bore witness to the cost. Even when reforms gradually improved nutrition and working conditions, habits formed in scarcity persisted. You may have continued to eat sparingly, savoring what was available, calculating portions, and viewing indulgence with caution. The lessons of moderation, learned under duress, became internalized norms. For some, this fostered resilience and thrift. For others, it produced anxiety and a cautious relationship with abundance. Middle-class children experienced different constraints. Meals were more generous and varied, yet still regulated. Table manners, measured portions, and formal routines taught restraint, respect, and awareness of social hierarchy. Even comfort was conditional. A well-laid table was an arena of moral and social education. Sugar, meat, and delicacies were carefully rationed, reinforcing the link between behavior and reward. You learned that eating was a moral act as much as a biological necessity. In both classes, the experience of food shaped social and moral identity. Hunger, scarcity, and careful rationing taught lessons in obedience, patience, and endurance. Abundance, when present, was framed by etiquette and propriety. Childhood diets were a microcosm of society, structured, hierarchical, and full of implicit instruction. Cultural and economic pressures ensured that food remained deeply intertwined with authority. Parents, employers, and teachers controlled not only what you ate but when, how, and how much. Your appetite became a regulated instrument, measured against necessity, moral expectations, and societal norms. Eating became a performance as much as sustenance, a demonstration of compliance, propriety, and readiness for the roles you were expected to assume as an adult. The physical consequences were significant. Undernutrition, combined with early labor, weakened bodies, delayed development, and left many vulnerable to illness. Even in households with sufficient resources, monotony and strict regulation shaped psychological responses to food. Indulgence was rare, patience mandatory. Taste, pleasure, and choice were subordinate to necessity and morality. Yet food also left traces of autonomy. Small acts of rebellion, savoring a hidden treat, sharing secret morsels, lingering over a favorite taste, allowed children to assert identity in subtle ways. These acts were fleeting but important. They reminded the child that some pleasures could still belong to them, even in a world dominated by control and scarcity. By the time you reach adulthood, these early lessons continue to echo. You carry habits of moderation, endurance, and caution. You may treasure small indulgences quietly, measure portions carefully, or regard abundance with suspicion. Childhood food patterns, framed by necessity, discipline, and moral instruction, shape the rhythms of adult life. And yet, as with every aspect of Victorian childhood, questions remain unresolved. How much of the adult you are the way you eat, the way you endure, the way you measure pleasure is a product of meals you were given or denied as a child? And how does a society that teaches its children to eat with restraint, obedience, and endurance remember those lessons in the lives of the adults who survive them? The diet of childhood, humble or harsh, becomes a quiet but enduring lens through which the world is understood, a measure of endurance, morality, and the subtle power of daily necessities over human life. It shapes bodies, minds, and even memory, leaving traces that persist long after the table has been cleared. Story 5: Apprenticeship and Obedience, Learning a Trade the Hard Way. At the age of 12 or 13, if you are a boy of a working-class family, the next step in your life is often a formal apprenticeship. You leave the relative familiarity of home and school and enter the world of labor fully, not as a helper or errand runner, but as someone who is expected to learn a trade while submitting completely to authority. Apprenticeship in Victorian Britain is both opportunity and crucible. It is a chance to acquire a skill that may secure your future, but it comes at the cost of freedom, comfort, and childhood. The workshop is a world of rules and hierarchy. You are greeted or warned by the master, a man or woman whose authority is absolute within these walls. Senior apprentices, journeymen, and other workers observe closely. You are expected to watch, learn, and obey without question. Curiosity is tolerated only insofar as it does not interfere with work. Mistakes are corrected swiftly, often harshly, and repeated errors can lead to prolonged punishment. Your first days are disorienting. The machinery is loud, unyielding, and dangerous. Your hands and fingers are small, which is why children are often preferred for certain tasks, yet this does not protect you from injury. Sharp tools, heavy equipment, and repetitive labor quickly teach caution. Pain becomes a daily companion, a teacher almost as constant as the master or supervisor. Each cut, burn, or bruise is memorized as a lesson in attention and skill. Work is exhaustive. The day begins before sunrise and extends long into the evening. You are on your feet constantly, moving between benches, machines, and materials. Breaks are brief and infrequent. Meals, when allowed, are simple: bread, cheese, or leftover gruel carried from home. The structure of the day leaves little space for reflection or play. Time is measured in hours worked, tasks completed, and mistakes avoided. Discipline is relentless. Corporal punishment is common, not only from masters but from senior apprentices entrusted with enforcing obedience. The lash of a cane, the sting of a strap, the firm push of authority all communicate that failure has immediate consequences. You learn quickly to anticipate expectations and internalize correction. Obedience becomes a survival strategy. Yet apprenticeship is not purely oppressive. There is skill to be learned, knowledge to be acquired, and a path toward independence. The master imparts trade secrets slowly, expecting the apprentice to observe, memorize, and replicate. Precision is valued above speed at first, quality over haste. Each correct action earns quiet approval. Each improvement strengthens your position and builds confidence. Hierarchy defines daily interactions. You learn your place relative to other apprentices and journeymen. Younger or less skilled apprentices are corrected publicly to reinforce order. Senior apprentices model competence but also enforce discipline. You observe, imitate, and learn the delicate balance of submission and assertion necessary to survive in the workshop. Mistakes are inevitable. Broken tools, spoiled material, misaligned joints, each error is a chance for instruction, but also for punishment. The line between correction and pain is thin. You are expected to accept both calmly. Emotional displays are discouraged. Frustration must be hidden, tears suppressed. Endurance, patience, and stoicism are prized above all else. Learning extends beyond physical skill. You also acquire lessons in hierarchy, social expectation, and negotiation. You observe how senior workers interact with the master, how wages are distributed, and how compliance or disobedience shapes outcomes. Even small choices when to speak, when to pause, when to accept a reprimand silently carry consequence. Apprenticeship becomes not only trade education, but social training, preparing you for the complex networks of authority you will encounter as an adult. For those who endure, rewards exist. Skill, once acquired, can lead to independence. A journeyman's wages, a respected position, a potential for setting up one's own workshop, these are distant but tangible goals. Yet the path is narrow and the cost high. Few escape unscathed, and even those who succeed carry the memory of long hours, strict discipline, and the physical and emotional strain of early labor. By the end of your first year, you begin to understand the delicate balance of apprenticeship. Obedience ensures survival. Skill ensures advancement. Endurance ensures that you reach the next day. Yet even in this structured environment, questions arise quietly in the mind of the apprentice. If childhood is sacrificed for skill, endurance, and obedience, what part of yourself remains untouched, and how much of your identity is defined by labor before it is ever your own? By the second year of your apprenticeship, the initial shock of the workshop has faded, but the demands have not. Your body has adapted to long hours, repetitive tasks, and constant supervision. Your hands bear calluses, scars, and sometimes permanent damage. Muscles tighten from repeated motion. Your back aches from bending over benches or hauling materials. Fatigue is a constant companion, but it has become familiar, almost expected. The work itself grows more complex. Simple tasks have been mastered. Now precision, speed, and problem-solving are required. You are learning not just to follow instructions, but to anticipate needs. If a senior worker or the master pauses, you fill the gap. If a machine malfunctions, you assist or improvise. Responsibility increases, and with it the risk. Mistakes carry higher consequences, ruined materials, delays, and sometimes severe punishment. Each day tests endurance, attention, and patience. Corporal punishment remains present, though less frequent than in the first months. By now, obedience has been internalized. You flinch before mistakes, correcting yourself preemptively. Yet authority is unpredictable. A sudden reprimand can still shock and hurt. Public correction continues to reinforce hierarchy. Your peers observe your response carefully. Your ability to endure signals competence, maturity, and resilience. Life beyond the workshop is scarce. Leisure is brief, meals are functional, and the body is taxed. If you are lucky, you may visit a nearby market, observe seasonal festivals, or find quiet moments for reading or personal reflection. Most of your energy, however, is spent in survival and skill building. The workshop becomes your world. Your sense of time, place, and even self is anchored in its rhythm. Relationships within the workshop are complex. Senior apprentices serve as mentors and enforcers. They model expertise while reminding you of your place. Journeymen may offer guidance, but also competition. Friendships are cautious, built around shared endurance and mutual understanding of hierarchy. Trust is measured by reliability, discretion, and willingness to conform. Deviance or rebellion carries risk not only to you but also to your peers. Gradually, mastery begins to emerge. Tasks once impossible are now routine. You can complete work efficiently, anticipate challenges, and correct errors before they are noticed. Pride emerges quietly, alongside fatigue and the ever-present awareness of authority. Skill becomes identity. You are the apprentice who can handle the lathe, mend the loom, or fashion tools correctly. Recognition comes not as applause but as subtle approval, a nod from the master or fewer reprimands. Yet the cost is visible in both body and mind. The repetition that creates skill also erodes curiosity and spontaneity. Energy once devoted to play or learning for pleasure is now consumed by survival and mastery. Early adulthood arrives before maturity in other areas emotionally, socially, and intellectually. Your life is structured entirely around productivity and obedience, leaving little space for exploration. The broader world, meanwhile, is changing slowly. Industrial growth increases demand for skilled labor. Masters profit from apprentices, labor and families rely on the wages and experience gained. Reformers discuss limits on hours, conditions of labor, and the ethics of early apprenticeship. These debates unfold in newspapers, commissions, and political halls, far from the grinding wheels of your daily life. At the same time, apprenticeships become a social filter. Those who endure hardship and follow instruction gain skill, connections, and eventual independence. Those who falter may leave the workshop prematurely, returning to menial labor or poverty. Success is never guaranteed. Endurance and obedience are necessary but not always sufficient. Luck, timing, and the temperament of your master play decisive roles. Even as skill consolidates, one quiet question persists in your mind. If obedience and endurance define the path to mastery, what is sacrificed along the way, and what will you have left of yourself when labor and authority are no longer the framework of your life? By the final years of apprenticeship, your body, mind, and spirit have been thoroughly shaped by the workshop. The routine that once seemed unbearable now feels familiar, almost necessary. You rise with the sun, move with practiced precision, and endure the long hours with a combination of habit and resignation. Skill is now tangible. Your hands can shape, repair, and craft with a level of competence that once seemed impossible. Yet the cost of this mastery is evident in every scar, callus, and twinge of fatigue. The transition to journeyman status is both a reward and a test. You have learned obedience, endurance, and precision. These qualities have been reinforced by repetition, punishment, and hierarchical oversight. Now, you are expected to operate with greater independence, but the lessons of apprenticeship do not disappear. You remain vigilant, self-disciplined, and hyper-aware of authority. You have learned to navigate hierarchy not just externally, but internally. Self-regulation has become instinctual. Socially, the apprenticeship years have left a subtle imprint. Friendships and alliances formed under pressure are enduring, but private life has often been neglected. Many of your peers have been shaped by similar pressures, and conversation often revolves around work, skill, and shared endurance. Courtship, leisure, and education were all secondary to labor, leaving gaps that are only partially filled in young adulthood. The balance between skill and personal freedom is delicate. Yet apprenticeship was not merely punishment. Skill provides opportunity. Journeyman wages allow independence. The ability to craft, repair, or manage a workshop ensures a place in the economic world. Masters, who once exercised near-absolute control over your movements and labor, now treat you as a colleague of sorts, a measure of trust and competence. Respect, once earned through obedience, is now reinforced by demonstrated skill. Despite these gains, the shadow of apprenticeship persists. Physical scars, chronic fatigue, and sometimes permanent injuries remain. Habits of endurance and suppression continue, influencing not only work but personal life. Emotion is managed, desires are measured, and caution often overrides curiosity. The mind and body carry a history of labor that cannot be erased by freedom alone. Reflection brings a complicated awareness. You recognize the harshness of your training and the ways in which it limited your childhood, but also the resilience it fostered. You survived, adapted, and gained skill that could sustain a livelihood. Apprenticeship in its harshest form was both a crucible and a classroom, a teacher of labor, endurance, social navigation, and survival. Victorian society benefits as well. Generations of skilled workers emerge, able to sustain industries, maintain standards, and contribute to economic growth. The system functions as intended in many ways, even as it exacts a steep cost from those it molds. The tension between productivity and childhood, authority and selfhood, endurance and well-being remains unresolved, yet it defines the lives of countless individuals. And finally, one thought lingers, echoing through the life of every former apprentice. When the lessons of obedience, endurance, and skill are etched so deeply into body and mind, who truly belongs to whom: the master, the trade, society, or the individual who survives the process? Story 6. Illness and Medicine. Victorian Children in Sickness and Health. In Victorian Britain, being a child means navigating a world full of invisible threats. Disease is omnipresent. Illness is not a rare interruption, it is a constant companion. Fever, cough, rickets, dysentery, smallpox, scarlet fever, tuberculosis all circulate freely through homes, streets, and schools. You may feel healthy in the morning and dangerously ill by nightfall. Your body is vulnerable, shaped by diet, labor, and environment, and medicine is often unpredictable, harsh, or absent. Your first exposure to illness is usually at home. Siblings fall sick, parents worry, remedies are improvised. A common cold may escalate because doctors are expensive and unreliable, while home remedies, onion poultices, mustard plasters, or herbal teas serve as both hope and ritual. You watch carefully. The sick are attended with care, but the limits of understanding are clear. Life can be fragile. Disease spreads quickly among children. Schools are crowded, workshops are cramped, homes are poorly ventilated. Airborne infections thrive in dust, damp, and close quarters. Fevered children are quarantined inconsistently. Isolation is rare. Contagion is inevitable. Your playmates may vanish for weeks with scarlet fever or measles, returning gaunt, scarred, or not at all. Death is a lesson learned early. Medical treatment is rudimentary, often painful, and rarely gentle. Doctors employ leeches, bleeding, emetics, or harsh purgatives. Some remedies are based on tradition or theory rather than evidence. Quack medicines are common. Parents and practitioners both act with limited tools, guided by hope, fear, and cultural authority. Relief is unpredictable. Pain is certain. Illness intersects with labor in dangerous ways. A child weakened by fever or malnutrition is expected to continue work as soon as possible. Factory owners, masters, and even parents often demand return to duty. The body is measured by productivity. Sick children may crawl back to the loom, the mine, or the workshop before fully recovered. Recovery is slow. Fatigue lingers. Vulnerability is reinforced. Nutrition shapes susceptibility. Children who have endured long hours of labor with meager meals are especially at risk. Gruel, bread, and weak tea do not provide the protein or vitamins needed to resist disease. Rickets, softened bones from lack of vitamin D, is common in the poor, as is scurvy and anemia. A child's frail body is a constant battlefield against environmental and social stressors. Even middle-class children are not immune. Though food, space, and supervision are generally better, infectious disease does not discriminate entirely. Contagion in schools or urban neighborhoods threatens all children. Parents resort to isolation, vaccination when available, and hygiene practices, yet vulnerability remains. Awareness of death and sickness is part of daily consciousness. You grow accustomed to the idea that life can end abruptly and that health is precarious. Hospitals are a last resort. Facilities for children are limited, often overcrowded and harsh. Nurses and staff may be competent but stern. Illness is managed as efficiently as possible, not as gently. Comfort is secondary to survival. If you are poor, admission may be delayed or impossible. If you are fortunate, treatment may include the rudimentary therapies of the era: sponge baths, tonic medicines, and care that is careful but not sophisticated. Preventive care is emerging but inconsistent. Vaccination against smallpox is available but not universally enforced. Sanitation laws in towns and cities are incomplete. Cholera, typhoid, and other epidemics flare unpredictably. Families live with uncertainty. You grow accustomed to vigilance, washing hands, avoiding contamination, monitoring food and water, watching the health of siblings. Fear becomes habit. Even healthy children are shaped by illness. Play is cautious, exposure limited, and daily routines constrained by risk. Health is fragile, endurance prized. Strength is measured by ability to continue work or school despite minor ailments. Survival is moral as well as physical. A child who endures weakness quietly demonstrates character and fortitude. By adolescence, these experiences leave traces. Your body may be small or weak, your endurance tested. Your understanding of life is inseparable from vulnerability. You have witnessed mortality intimately, learned resilience, and internalized caution. Yet curiosity and vitality persist, sometimes dangerously, as children test limits despite awareness of risk. One unresolved thought lingers as illness shapes childhood. If survival depends on endurance in the face of disease, and resilience is rewarded more than comfort or care, what is the true cost of growing up in a world where frailty is both expected and dangerous? As childhood progresses, illness becomes not only a personal challenge but a site of experimentation. Medicine in Victorian Britain is advancing, but unevenly, and children often bear the brunt of both ignorance and innovation. Remedies are plentiful but inconsistent, some helpful, others dangerous. If you fall ill, you are treated as both patient and subject, often with little understanding of your own body or the potential consequences. Doctors are respected authorities, but access is limited. Families with means may hire a physician or visit a dispensary. Poorer children rely on home remedies, apothecaries, or charitable institutions. Treatments range from herbal poultices and tonics to the more extreme, bleeding, purging, or blistering. Many of these interventions are painful and, by modern standards, ineffective or even harmful. Yet they are administered with conviction, guided by prevailing medical theories of balance, humors, or contagion. In hospitals and infirmaries, children become observers and participants in medical progress. Pediatric care is emerging as a specialty, but beds are scarce, and children often share space with adults. Hygiene is rudimentary. Illness is monitored, but comfort is secondary. Nurses and doctors prioritize survival and efficiency over tenderness. Procedures are harsh. Lessons in endurance continue. Crying is discouraged, patience required, stillness demanded. Vaccination is one of the few preventive measures available. Smallpox inoculation, increasingly common, can prevent epidemic death, yet access is uneven. Some children receive protection early, others too late, and skepticism or fear of side effects may prevent compliance. Success is inconsistent, and the threat of outbreak remains ever present. Disease is compounded by environment. Urban neighborhoods are crowded, unsanitary, and rife with infection. Workhouses, factories, and schools are poorly ventilated. Water is often contaminated. Sewage runs openly in streets. Exposure to disease is unavoidable, and resilience is measured by the ability to continue despite illness. Children who survive repeated bouts of fever, diarrhea, or respiratory infections develop toughness, but at a physical cost. Nutrition intersects critically with health. Many children who have endured long hours of labor, minimal food, and poor diets are especially vulnerable. Iron deficiency, rickets, and malnutrition weaken immunity. You may recover from illness slowly, your growth stunted, your energy diminished. Yet endurance is expected. School, work, and chores continue, often without accommodation for weakness. Sickness is a minor interruption rather than a central concern. The psychological toll is profound. Children learn to fear illness but also to conceal it. Complaints may provoke rebuke or punishment. Endurance becomes a moral expectation. The child who suffers quietly is deemed virtuous. The one who falters publicly is reprimanded. Anxiety, hypervigilance, and stoicism are cultivated, often before the child has developed adult comprehension. Medical experimentation, both formal and informal, is another hazard. Physicians document symptoms, prescribe novel treatments or test techniques, sometimes with ethical oversight, often without. Children in workhouses, hospitals, or orphanages may be treated as ideal subjects, vulnerable, numerous, and largely voiceless. Each intervention carries risk. Survival is never guaranteed, and the boundary between care and trial is often blurred. Yet there is hope. The mid to late Victorian period sees improvements in sanitation, nursing, and medical education. Florence Nightingale's reforms in hospitals begin to influence pediatric care. Charitable organizations and emerging public health initiatives work to reduce epidemics. Access to treatment, when available, improves outcomes. Children who would have died decades earlier now have a chance at recovery. By adolescence, the cumulative impact of illness, nutrition, and medical care is visible. Your body may bear scars, both literal and invisible. Endurance, cautiousness, and awareness of mortality shape behavior. Curiosity and vitality persist, but they are tempered by lived experience. You have learned that the body is fragile, that survival requires strategy, and that medicine, though advancing, is often uncertain. One unresolved thought lingers. If resilience and survival depend on enduring both illness and experimental care, what part of childhood is lost to the necessities of survival, and how much does enduring fragility shape the rest of life? As childhood moves toward adolescence, the patterns of sickness, recovery, and endurance leave an indelible mark on every child who survives. You have witnessed fever, cough, and outbreaks of disease. You have endured treatment both harsh and inconsistent, and you have learned, often painfully, the limits of your own body. These experiences shape resilience, adaptability, and understanding of risk in ways that extend far beyond immediate illness. Physical consequences are apparent. Children weakened by repeated bouts of disease often show stunted growth or fragile bones. Chronic conditions, rickets, tuberculosis, asthma leave lifelong effects. Some recover partially, gaining strength with age and improved diet, while others carry permanent disability. Pain, fatigue, and susceptibility to further illness are constant companions. Survival is not absolute. It is hard-won and incomplete. Psychological impacts are equally significant. Children learn to monitor their bodies constantly, to anticipate illness, and to regulate behavior according to their own strength or weakness. Stoicism becomes habitual. Complaints are muted. Endurance is moralized. Fear of disease and death becomes an underlying current in daily life, teaching vigilance, caution, and strategic decision-making from an early age. Medicine itself leaves a lasting imprint. Some remedies provide relief, some cause further harm, and some are inconclusive. The unpredictability of care fosters a cautious respect for medical authority, combined with skepticism and wariness. You learn that survival often depends on judgment, observation, and self-advocacy, even in a society where children are expected to comply quietly. Nutrition and environment continue to influence health. Children who endured scarcity, poor diets, and physical labor often emerge as cautious eaters or resilient individuals with finely tuned habits of endurance. Those who received better sustenance and hygiene show stronger growth and stamina, yet all children carry the imprint of early exposure to disease and deprivation. These early lessons shape adult health, appetite, and behavior in subtle, sometimes irreversible ways. Socially, illness reshapes networks and obligations. Families, peers, and employers expect recovery and resilience. A sick child may temporarily withdraw from work or school, but prolonged illness brings social pressure and sometimes moral judgment. Survival is intertwined with obedience, effort, and the ability to resume expected roles. The boundaries between care, duty, and productivity are fluid, reinforcing lessons learned from early labor and moral instruction. Victorian children also learn from witnessing the illness and death of others. Siblings, neighbors, and classmates may succumb to diseases that modern medicine now prevents. Death is both a moral lesson and a social reality. Mourning, observation, and adaptation are all part of education. You internalize the fragility of life and the imperative of endurance. Life becomes measured not only in years, but in capacity to withstand hardship. At the same time, advances in medicine and public health begin to show promise. Improved sanitation, vaccination programs, and hospital reform offer hope. Children begin to live longer, recover more fully, and experience illness differently than earlier generations. Yet the lessons of frailty, endurance, and vigilance remain encoded in behavior, mindset, and memory. Survival is both a triumph and a marker of past hardship. By the end of childhood, a complex understanding emerges. You recognize the precariousness of life, the limits of authority and medicine, and the importance of resilience. Health is not guaranteed. Survival requires both physical and mental adaptation. The experience of illness has shaped not only your body but your perception of the world, your understanding of risk, and your capacity for endurance. And so, as you reflect on the interplay of sickness, care, and survival, one enduring question remains. If childhood is defined by vulnerability and endurance, and health is never assured, what is lost in the years spent navigating frailty, and what resilience or wisdom is gained in its place? Story 7. Marriage and Family Expectations. Preparing Children for Adult Roles. In Victorian Britain, childhood is not only a stage of learning, labor, and endurance, it is a period of preparation for adult social and familial obligations. From an early age, children are educated in the expectations that will shape their future marriages, households, and relationships. These lessons are rarely formal. They are embedded in conversation, observation, and daily life. You absorb them quietly, through the rituals and routines of family, work, and neighborhood. For girls, the instruction begins with domestic observation. From the earliest age, you are taught the tasks you will one day manage: cooking, cleaning, mending, and caring for siblings. Chores are not merely practical, they are symbolic. You learn to measure your labor, anticipate needs, and manage both time and resources efficiently. Skills are accompanied by moral instruction. Patience, humility, and attention to detail are as important as technique. Proper conduct in the household is viewed as a reflection of character, and your reputation within the family becomes a precursor for how you will be judged in society. For boys, preparation emphasizes responsibility, provision, and respectability. You observe your father or male relatives negotiating business, managing apprentices, or navigating social expectations. Even play and schooling are shaped by future roles. Lessons in numeracy, writing, and trade skills are coupled with moral instruction emphasizing honesty, diligence, and reliability. Early labor chores, apprenticeships, and errands teaches endurance, self-discipline, and accountability, skills essential for adult success and the eventual role of provider. Courtship is framed as another area of preparation. Stories, family warnings, and social observation teach you the expected patterns of behavior. Girls learn to moderate speech, display virtue, and cultivate modesty. Boys learn to demonstrate competence, propriety, and social standing. The language of attraction is intertwined with reputation, morality, and opportunity. Children observe adults, marriages, their successes and failures as cautionary examples. Even minor behaviors are interpreted through this lens. Politeness, restraint, and conformity are measured not only by family approval, but by how they might influence future marital prospects. Education and social interaction reinforce these lessons. Schools, Sunday schools, and neighborhood interactions emphasize virtue, duty, and conformity. Reading materials, fairy tales, moral instruction books, and scripture often illustrate the rewards of obedience, diligence, and proper conduct, as well as the dangers of deviation. You internalize the idea that future happiness and social acceptance depend on adherence to these social and familial codes. Gender roles are rigidly reinforced. Girls who display ambition beyond domestic skill may be warned subtly or overtly that such behavior could jeopardize their reputation. Boys who shirk labor or moral responsibility face scolding or ridicule. Compliance is a currency. Early understanding of hierarchy and propriety shapes not only how you behave, but how you interpret your own desires, ambitions, and identity. Even in play, lessons of marriage and family are encoded. Children act out domestic scenes, mimic adult conversation, or assign roles reflecting societal expectations. Dolls, toy kitchens, and games of trade or household management serve as miniature classrooms. Through repetition, observation, and imitation, you internalize the skills and behaviors that will one day define your adult responsibilities. Economic circumstances further shape expectations. Working-class families may emphasize early labor and contribution to household income, reinforcing the necessity of endurance, skill, and practical competence. Middle-class families stress moral propriety, education, and social performance, preparing children to navigate courtship, marriage negotiations, and household management. Wealth and status influence the balance between labor, morality, and social preparation, but the underlying goal is the same. Children are trained to fulfill their adult roles efficiently, obediently, and without excessive disruption. Marriage, in this sense, is not an abstract concept, it is the inevitable culmination of childhood socialization. Every lesson, observation, and reprimand contributes to an understanding of duty, hierarchy, and expectation. Personal desires are often secondary. Preparation is paramount. You learn that your future role in a household, whether as caretaker, provider, or social actor, is defined long before the wedding day. Yet questions emerge quietly amid these lessons. If childhood is a training ground for adult roles, and personal desires are tempered by observation, labor, and instruction, what part of the self belongs solely to the individual, and how much is claimed by society before one has a chance to choose? As you move into adolescence, the lessons of home, school, and labor begin to coalesce into a concrete awareness of adult expectations. You are no longer merely performing tasks for practice, you are learning how to navigate relationships, responsibilities, and societal judgment in preparation for life beyond childhood. Every action, word, and choice carries moral and social significance, teaching endurance, restraint, and foresight. Girls continue to hone domestic skills under ever-watchful eyes. Cooking is no longer simple meals, but complete routines designed to feed a family efficiently. Sewing and mending become precision tasks. Laundry, cleaning, and organization are refined, ensuring you understand the daily rhythm of household management. Even small mistakes are noted. Burnt bread, uneven stitching, or untidy spaces may provoke disapproval, teaching both practical skill and the emotional resilience required to accept correction without complaint. For boys, apprenticeship and work become arenas where character is measured. You are expected to demonstrate reliability, competence, and moral fortitude. Mistakes in labor, delays, or lapses in attention are not merely technical errors, they reflect personal character. Supervisors, parents, and peers monitor you constantly. Observing how adults negotiate, interact, and maintain respectability teaches subtle lessons. Humility without subservience, ambition without arrogance, and competence tempered by obedience. Courtship and social observation intensify. Young people begin to notice propriety, reputation, and compatibility in potential partners. Behavior is measured not solely for personal interest, but for the approval of family and society. Innocent friendships are scrutinized, and lessons from adult marriage's successes, failures, compromises inform your understanding of long-term relationships. The concept of love is often secondary to duty, economic practicality, and social expectation. Economic reality shapes urgency. Working-class adolescents may be expected to contribute financially or prove themselves capable of managing household duties early. Middle-class youth navigate social rules that influence marriage prospects, such as family connections, dowries, and reputation. In every case, childhood has already prepared you for negotiation with societal pressures. Personal preference is constrained by practicality and expectation. Education reinforces moral and social conditioning. Reading, writing, arithmetic, and moral instruction are imbued with lessons about responsibility and character. Religious teachings emphasize virtue, temperance, and obedience. Stories of moral failings serve as cautionary tales, linking behavior to both domestic and marital success. Your intellectual development is therefore inseparable from social expectation, creating a framework in which every decision is measured against long-term consequences. Gender norms dictate acceptable behavior, and deviation is risky. Girls who exhibit assertiveness or independence are cautioned or corrected to preserve reputation. Boys who shirk labor, morality, or decorum are reprimanded, sometimes publicly, as a warning to others. Self-expression is mediated through expectation. Autonomy is limited, yet within this framework, children learn negotiation, observation, and subtle assertion of will, skills essential for surviving the complex social landscape of adulthood. Family observation continues to be a primary teacher. You witness marriages firsthand, parental compromises, sibling alliances, and domestic hierarchies reveal the balance between affection, duty, and authority. You note which behaviors are rewarded and which provoke conflict. These lessons are absorbed quietly, shaping your understanding of household dynamics, negotiation, and compromise. Yet tension persists. As you grow, you begin to notice the difference between what you desire and what is expected. Even as you learn practical skills, moral discipline, and social observation, the sense of personal choice is constrained. Childhood, designed to produce capable adults, is both a classroom and a cage. By late adolescence, anticipation of marriage and family roles weighs heavily. You may wonder about compatibility, personal fulfillment, and independence, yet the lessons of obedience, endurance, and social expectation dominate decision-making. The preparation is thorough. Survival, skill, morality, and propriety have been drilled into daily life for more than a decade. And as this stage of life reaches its threshold, a quiet question lingers. If every lesson, habit, and observation is designed to prepare you for adult duty, what space remains for personal happiness, and can one ever reconcile desire with expectation in a world that begins shaping you before you can choose? By the time childhood fully yields to adulthood, the years of preparation come into sharp focus. The lessons instilled in domestic skills, labor, moral discipline, and social observation now serve a singular purpose: equipping you to enter marriage and manage a household according to societal expectations. Yet the transition is rarely seamless, and the tension between duty and personal desire becomes most apparent in these early adult years. For girls, the shift is immediate. The skills honed in childhood and adolescence, cooking, cleaning, managing servants, sewing, and childcare, become daily responsibilities in their full intensity. Households are demanding, resources are limited, mistakes carry social consequences. The efficiency, patience, and attention to detail learned over years of preparation are now tested in the real world, and the smallest lapse may invite criticism, whether from a spouse, relatives, or neighbors. Success is measured not only in household management, but in maintaining decorum, reputation, and moral virtue. For boys, apprenticeship, labor, and education translate into the adult expectation of provision and authority. You are expected to maintain employment, manage finances, and navigate social obligations, all while demonstrating the reliability, diligence, and moral rectitude instilled since childhood. Authority is no longer observed from the outside. It is exercised directly. Mistakes or failures carry real-world consequences: strained marriages, financial difficulties, or diminished social standing. The endurance and obedience cultivated during apprenticeship and childhood labor are critical, but autonomy now tests these lessons in complex ways. Marriage itself is both a personal and social contract. Beyond affection, It is a merging of households, resources, and expectations. The lessons of childhood moderation, patience, and propriety inform behavior in subtle but profound ways. You may find that habits learned in youth, such as restraint in speech, attentiveness to chores, and endurance through discomfort, define how you negotiate domestic life. Yet the preparation cannot account fully for the emotional complexity of partnership, leaving room for surprise, disappointment, or conflict. Family dynamics remain central. Children are not only trained to care for their own households, but also to navigate extended family obligations. Respect for elders, deference to advice, and management of household labor skills developed through observation and practice now apply in practical and sometimes frustrating ways. In-laws, neighbors, and community members all assess conduct, reinforcing the lessons learned over years of careful socialization. The psychological imprint of preparation is profound. Obedience, patience, and endurance are habits that persist, sometimes clashing with desires for independence, spontaneity, or intimacy. The tension between what society expects and what the individual wants can create subtle dissonance. You may excel in household management or provision, yet feel constrained by the very training that ensured your competence. The sense of identity cultivated through observation, labor, and moral instruction is inseparable from the obligations now placed upon you. Despite the rigor of preparation, some lessons must be learned anew. Emotional negotiation, compromise, and affection are not fully taught in childhood. You discover, sometimes painfully, that human relationships cannot be reduced to rules, efficiency, or moral instruction alone. Love, disappointment, and conflict operate in ways that extend beyond training. Yet the resilience, discipline, and social awareness gained during childhood provide tools for navigation. Endurance learned through years of expectation becomes a quiet strength in facing these new challenges. Ultimately, marriage and family life represent the culmination of Victorian childhood's overarching project, transforming youth into functional, obedient, and resilient adults. Yet this achievement is never total. The tension between personal desire and societal expectation lingers. You carry the lessons of childhood into adulthood, shaping your behavior, priorities, and even perception of happiness. The skills and endurance that ensured survival, respectability, and competence also leave subtle traces of limitation and constraint. And so, as you settle into your adult roles, one enduring question remains. If every childhood lesson was designed to shape a competent adult, how much of your personal identity, your desires, impulses, and dreams remains untouched? And how does a life molded so carefully reconcile the demands of duty with the pursuit of personal fulfillment? Story 8. Workhouses and Orphanages. Childhood in Institutional Care. In Victorian Britain, not every child grows up under the steady supervision of a family. Poverty, death, or misfortune can place children into institutional care workhouses, orphanages, or charitable homes where daily life is regimented, austere, and often harsh. For a child entering such a place, the experience is both bewildering and formative. Home, however humble, is replaced by a world governed by rules, schedules, and authority figures whose primary concern is efficiency and survival, rather than comfort or affection. The workhouse, as defined by the 1834 Poor Law Amendment Act, is a model of rigid control. You are stripped of individuality almost immediately upon entry. Clothing is standardized, meals are regulated, and sleeping arrangements are communal. Personal space is minimal, privacy is nearly non-existent, authority is omnipresent. Masters, matrons, and overseers monitor your behavior constantly, and disobedience is punished with strictness designed to enforce conformity. Daily schedules are relentless. From the moment you rise, chores dominate your existence. Cleaning, laundry, food preparation, and maintenance fill the hours. Education, if provided, is functional rather than enriching. You may learn reading, writing, and basic arithmetic, but the primary focus is on producing obedient, capable workers who can contribute to the institution or be placed in employment elsewhere. Play, leisure, and comfort are scarce, and every action is measured against rules and expectations. Meals are basic, often meager, and designed to sustain rather than delight. Gruel, bread, and watery soup are common. You eat quickly, under observation, and with minimal utensils. Nutritional deficiencies are frequent. The monotony of the diet, combined with physical labor, shapes both body and mind. Hunger is constant, yet complaining or lingering is unacceptable. The ability to endure discomfort quietly becomes a core lesson of institutional childhood. Orphanages and charitable homes vary in quality, but the lessons of structure and discipline remain consistent. Children are taught to obey authority, complete tasks efficiently, and conform to societal expectations. Affection, personal preference, and individuality are secondary considerations. The child learns that survival within the institution depends on compliance, resilience, and strategic discretion. Knowing which behaviors draw approval and which provoke punishment becomes essential. Socialization is constrained yet instructive. You interact with peers constantly, but relationships are mediated by hierarchy, competition, and supervision. Friendships form and dissolve under the pressure of strict schedules and shared hardship. Older children are often expected to supervise younger ones, reinforcing a sense of responsibility, but also extending the system of authority downward. Observation, mimicry, and conformity dominate social learning. Health and hygiene are precarious. Institutions are crowded, poorly ventilated, and prone to outbreaks of disease. Illness spreads quickly, and treatment is rudimentary. Children who are frail, malnourished, or sickly are at high risk. Discipline does not always yield to care. Endurance is expected, and weakness is treated as a moral failing. Survival depends on learning to navigate these conditions, balancing compliance with small acts of self-preservation. Education, when present, is practical rather than inspirational. Lessons are designed to prepare you for labor rather than intellectual exploration. Reading, writing, arithmetic, and moral instruction dominate, often intertwined with religious teaching. You are trained not for personal development, but for the roles society deems appropriate. Obedient worker, compliant adult, contributor to the economy. Individual ambition is secondary, often discouraged in favor of conformity. The emotional landscape is stark. Separation from family, siblings, or familiar surroundings is traumatic. Affection is scarce, rationed, and often conditional. Children learn to suppress fear, grief, and longing, internalizing endurance as a form of moral and social currency. Emotional resilience is a survival skill as vital as physical endurance or practical skill. Yet even in this rigid environment, small acts of autonomy persist. Sharing a morsel of food, whispering with a friend, or memorizing a story quietly can provide comfort and a sense of individuality. These small rebellions are often the only way to assert identity in a system designed to minimize personal expression. And so, life in a workhouse or orphanage becomes a masterclass in survival, navigating authority, enduring scarcity, learning skills, and preserving fragments of self. But one question lingers persistently. If childhood is spent under constant supervision, discipline, and deprivation, what survives of imagination, curiosity, and personal desire? And how does one emerge into adulthood shaped by institutional life? As you settle into life in the workhouse or orphanage, the rhythm of labor, discipline, and routine dominates every day. Work is both practical and moralized. It is a measure of your value, obedience, and potential for future success. You rise early, often before dawn, to complete chores, scrubbing floors, washing laundry, tending gardens, or assisting in kitchens. Repetition dominates your world, and efficiency is prized above creativity or comfort. Each task is a test of endurance, attention, and conformity. Discipline is constant. Mistakes, burning food, spilling water, failing to scrub thoroughly are met with reprimand or punishment. The overseers, matrons, and senior children enforce rules relentlessly. Corporal punishment, though regulated in theory, is common in practice. A misstep may result in a cane, a prolonged chore, or a public humiliation designed to instill both fear and compliance. You learn quickly that obedience is not optional. Survival depends on it. The social order within the institution mirrors the hierarchy outside, yet it is intensified. Older children supervise younger ones, establishing layers of authority within the institution itself. Friendships are strategic as well as emotional. Trust is cautious, and alliances are often temporary. You learn who to rely upon, who to emulate, and how to navigate rivalries, all skills necessary for both institutional survival and life beyond its walls. Education, if provided, is interwoven with labor. Reading, writing, and arithmetic are taught alongside religious instruction and moral lessons. Every lesson is measured against utility. Skills are valued for their ability to help you secure employment, contribute to society, and maintain discipline. Curiosity is tolerated only if it does not disrupt routine. Imagination, play, and personal expression are discouraged, leaving children to develop resilience, self-reliance, and ingenuity in subtle, often hidden ways. Meals remain sparse and regimented. Gruel, bread, watery soup, and occasional vegetables form the daily diet. Food is eaten quickly, under observation, and with little opportunity for pleasure. Hunger is a constant companion, teaching moderation, patience, and the value of thrift. Children learn to ration, share discreetly, and endure discomfort. For many, the memory of scarcity shapes adult behavior and attitude toward nourishment for life. Illness is a shadow that looms constantly. Communal living, poor sanitation, and limited medical knowledge make disease inevitable. Children who fall sick must endure quarantine, rudimentary treatment, and the scrutiny of staff. Weakness is often interpreted as moral failing, and recovery is expected to be swift. Your body becomes a measure of your resilience, endurance, and compliance. Frailty is rarely excused. Psychologically, the institution is a training ground in self-control and observation. You learn to anticipate authority, navigate rules, and mask fear or distress. Survival requires subtlety, knowing when to speak, when to act, and when to conceal needs. These lessons, though harsh, equip you with the social intelligence to function in adult society. Small acts of rebellion, hiding a morsel of food, whispering with a peer, keeping a personal memento become crucial ways to assert identity amid constraint. Preparation for future life is embedded in every routine. Girls develop household management skills, discipline, and endurance. Boys cultivate reliability, skill, and obedience. Labor is training, routine is instruction, and endurance is moral education. The institution teaches you that survival, respect, and social value are inseparable from conformity, skill, and self-restraint. Yet even amid strict control, uncertainty persists. Will the skills you acquire suffice for a stable future? Will resilience forged under duress carry you into adulthood unbroken? And most quietly of all, if a childhood spent in institutional care is defined by labor, obedience, and survival, what remains of your individuality, imagination, and emotional life when the gates finally open? By the time you leave the workhouse or orphanage, the habits, endurance, and lessons of institutional life are deeply ingrained. You have learned to rise early, perform repetitive labor efficiently, obey authority without question, and navigate a hierarchy both subtle and rigid. These skills are essential for survival and social functioning, yet they come at a cost. Your individuality, spontaneity, and emotional expression have been shaped and often constrained by the institution. The transition to the outside world is both liberating and daunting. Freedom offers choice, but your behavior remains conditioned by years of structure. You instinctively measure words, anticipate authority, and temper impulses. Even in moments of leisure, the patterns of discipline and efficiency learned under supervision influence how you act, how you interact with others, and how you perceive risk. The habits of endurance and careful observation remain your strongest allies, but they also reveal the hidden toll of institutional upbringing. Employment is the first test of this adaptation. Boys and young men often enter trades, apprenticeships, or labor-intensive jobs. The skills, diligence, and obedience cultivated in the workhouse provide a competitive advantage, but social and emotional skills may lag behind. Young women enter domestic service, factory work, or other forms of labor requiring endurance, discretion, and reliability. Practical competence is rarely the problem. The challenge lies in asserting personal agency within adult environments that are less regimented but still demanding. Social relationships, including friendships and courtship, require negotiation in ways unfamiliar within institutional life. You are accustomed to hierarchy and strict rules, but real-world interactions demand subtlety, flexibility, and emotional expression. Trust is cautious, affection measured. Peer relationships can feel fragile, while romantic connections challenge the skills you acquired in observation and obedience. Adaptation requires learning how to balance the ingrained lessons of the institution with the realities of adult life. The psychological imprint of childhood and care is enduring. Resilience, patience, and self-reliance are strengths, but anxiety, caution, and mistrust may persist. You may struggle with spontaneity or assertiveness, feeling the weight of internalized rules long after the institution has released you. Emotional experiences are often filtered through the lens of survival. Discretion, self-control, and endurance remain paramount, even when no authority is watching. Health and nutrition continue to influence adult life. Many institutionalized children left care weakened by poor diets, overwork, or illness. Growth, strength, and long-term health may be compromised, requiring continued adaptation and self-care. Others, despite adversity, carry the resilience and stamina forged under austere conditions into adulthood. The legacy of scarcity, labor, and discipline remains a defining feature of life outside the institution. Yet, amid the hardship, some gains are undeniable. Skills, knowledge, and endurance provide a foundation for economic independence and social navigation. Survival in the institution proves your capacity to adapt, endure, and manage both labor and authority. These lessons, while costly, equip you to face the complexities of adult life. The child who endured is also the adult who can persevere, plan, and work with precision under pressure. And still, the lingering question follows you. If childhood was largely defined by survival, labor, and obedience, what remains of the unshaped self-curiosity, imagination, and emotional freedom? And can the adult who emerges reclaim parts of life denied to them in youth? The experience of institutional childhood casts a long shadow, shaping bodies, minds, and social behavior. Endurance, conformity, and survival are triumphs, but they are triumphs measured against cost. The lessons of the workhouse or orphanage are never forgotten, echoing through adult habits, relationships, and the quiet calculation of risk and resilience in a world that offers both opportunity and challenge.